Tucker Carlson interviewed most of the Republican candidates for president in Iowa the other day, and it appears that Tucker caused all but one of them to take any opportunity for the nomination just by letting them speak. This and more today on The Michael Wilson Show.
From the American Beacon Studios, this is The Michael Wilson Show.
So to start today's news cycle off, we need to talk about the Tucker Carlson event in Iowa. So Tucker Carlson basically hosted like a town hall type situation. He interviewed all of the Republican candidates for president, except for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump doesn't feel the need to go anywhere, not to debates, not to anything, and Chris Christie, considering that you actually consider Chris Christie to be a valid candidate. I don't. So when I say all the candidates, I don't consider Chris Christie. Even if he did show up, I wouldn't have talked about him at all today. There's just not really anything to talk about. His whole running position is anti-Trumpness, which I don't think is very cool. Like, even if you don't like Trump, making your whole campaign, I don't like Trump, it seems ridiculous to me, especially because everyone likes Trump. So we're not going to talk about Chris Christie because he wasn't there, and even if he was, it wouldn't matter. But we do have a couple of other people to talk about. So Tim Scott was one of the first guys. I think he was the first guy that spoke. And Tim Scott, his main position throughout the evening during his talking was that we still need to be helping Ukraine, which I think that is a seriously very large losing position for any Republican nominee. Anyone that wants the nomination to run in the general election needs to back off of Ukraine entirely, even if they personally think that Ukraine could be a good idea, unless they think it is a moral imperative that their candidacy rely on helping aid Ukraine, which it isn't, nor is it good. But even if you believe that it is, choosing to run on the basis that you think that it is a ridiculous proposition, because no Republican wants to support Ukraine anymore. A very, very small minority cares about Ukraine. I think it's something like 5% cares about helping Ukraine, especially because we've already spent billions of dollars in aid. We've sent all number of weapons of war for them, for no reason, because they're not even our ally. There's been practically no reason to do any of it, and we've wasted our tax money on it. And so Republicans in general are just done. And so people like Tim Scott running on the position that we should still be helping Ukraine, it's preposterous and ridiculous, and I think it's completely an error and foolish, even if he does believe the things that he's saying. Asa Hutchinson was another name that was interviewed that evening. Asa Hutchinson, governor of Arkansas, he made a really, really big mistake. In my opinion, it's a much larger mistake than supporting Ukraine. The mistake he made, and I'll kind of put this in position. I'll kind of put you in the perspective of someone that had attended, because he didn't start out just by saying these things. So Tucker Carlson was going to question him about a bill that he had vetoed. And before Tucker was able to even really get a word out, Asa Hutchinson went, are there any parents in this room? Raise your hand if you're a parent, right? Most politician thing he could have possibly done in the circumstances, which made him look even worse, in my opinion. But he had all the parents in the room raise their hands. He said, I'm also a parent. And I think that parental rights are of utmost importance, especially to Republicans. It is imperative that we uphold parental rights, even at other rights' expenses, because when we give the government power to do whatever it wants at the expense of parents and their rights, it's bad, right? Which, on the surface, of course, pretty much every Republican is going to agree with. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for the viewers of that event, that was not really, the setup for the kind of thing we would expect it to be. So actually, what the bill said was that no matter whether the parents wanted it or not, or the child wanted it, or the school wanted it, no child had the right to puberty blockers, chemical castration. It was banning all gender-affirming care for minors, was what the bill did. And this Republican governor, despite the fact that it had passed all Arkansas legislation, vetoed the bill in the name of parental rights. So, assuming we believe it was for parental rights, given the benefit of the doubt, he genuinely, wholeheartedly believes that parental rights are a good thing, even if the parental rights include abusing children, which is an absolutely evil position, even at its best. Because parental rights are a good thing. So I will talk a lot about why parental rights are a good thing. I will talk a lot on my show about how I'm a father myself. I think that fathers are going to make a huge difference in the world. I think that we have the power to do so. But I do not think that our rights are unlimited. I don't. I think that if we are abusing children, if we are telling them that they, even though they were born a boy, that they can be a girl, and then providing them with quote unquote health care, which is ridiculous, providing them with things that are irreversible, that do irreversible damage to children in the name of social justice, is absolutely evil, and the government absolutely should infringe on quote unquote parental rights in a circumstance such as that. So I think that is, I think Asa Hutchinson threw himself out of the race with that, honestly. I don't think, I mean, the polls right now are showing that he's down to 1% or lower. So I don't think that Asa Hutchinson has any kind of chance, mainly because that's a Democrat position. Sure, he can label it as parental rights, but the position he took was a Democratic position. It was one that you believe that it is a good thing, that it, I mean, he even admitted to Tucker Carlson, point blank, that he believed that it was considered health care. It was a health care right. It is not health care to harm children, period, exclamation point, another period. It's not even good grammar, but I need to drive the point home. It is not health care, and it is not under a parent's right to abuse children disgustingly. It just isn't. Okay, the last guy that really threw himself in the mud was Mike Pence. But I don't think he threw himself in the mud the way that the media is trying to tell us that he did. So I'm going to play the clip here in a second. But Mike Pence was talking about Ukraine. Yes, he also supports Ukraine. Go figure. Mike Pence supports Ukraine, and he was talking about it. And Tucker Carlson started questioning him about, America and how his priority should be here at home. And Mike Pence responded with, quote unquote, "That's not my concern." A lot of people on the right are trying to paint that as him saying that American cities aren't his concern. I don't think that's true at all. I think it's a blatant misrepresentation. And they're not doing it on accident. They're not saying that's what they thought he said. They purposely are misrepresenting his sentence. Now, maybe he didn't communicate clearly, but we're going to watch the whole clip, and I think it's going to be blatantly obvious what Mike Pence was trying to say. And I'm still going to critique what he had to say. I'm just not going to critique it unfairly. So here we go.
You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse.
That's true.
Over the past 3 years. Yeah. Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. Right. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. Right. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. Right. I think it's a fair question to ask, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
See?
Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern. I'm running for president of the United States because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. And as President of the United States, we're going to restore law and order in our cities. We're going to secure our border. We're going to get this economy moving again. And we're going to make sure that we have men and women on our courts at every level that will stand for the right to life and defend all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution. Anybody that says that we can't be the leader of the free world and solve our problems at home has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. We can do both.
So basically, what all the conservatives are saying is that he was trying to say that he didn't care about American cities, that he cared more about Ukraine, which I don't think at all is what Mike Pence was trying to communicate. I don't see it at all. I think that it was pretty clear that Mike Pence was saying that we should and can and should do both. That we should not only focus on American cities, which should be our concern primarily. I think he was saying that. And I think he was saying that we should fix our economy, that we should make sure that we're following the pro-life agenda, that we should make sure that our border's protected. But on top of that, we also should be helping Ukraine. I think that was the position of Mike Pence. I think he made that pretty clear throughout the entire clip. I think that it is a little bit wrong that conservatives are ending the clip where he says that's not my concern and pretending like he was referring to American cities not being his concern as president. That's not at all what he was saying. Now, what he was saying was still absolutely just wrong, right? Like, Ukraine really is not our concern. What is happening to Ukraine is not our concern. It never was. We have spent tens of billions of dollars, money that we as hardworking Americans had to pay to the government for them to give to another country. It's all part of an agenda, and they've been doing it for years now. And for Mike Pence to sit there and pretend like it's a good thing and like we should still be doing it, I think is a little bit ridiculous. I think it's definitely not what again, and this is the same thing I said about Tim Scott. This is definitely not what the Republican voters are looking for out of their nominee in 2024. It just isn't. So I think Mike Pence has done himself a huge disservice, not only by believing it, but by adamantly making it a big point of his campaign, which he's done. He's very, very, very much in defense of Ukraine, to the extent that I think that he's seriously turned off most Republican voters. And I think the polls illustrate that as well. So we could talk a little bit about Vivek Ramaswamy, but I want to save that for the next episode we have coming out, because I'm going to go a little bit more in depth and talk about him. So don't think that I'm ignoring poor little Vivek. I'm not. I think that he's a very, very important person to talk about. In fact, so important that I'm devoting a whole section out of our next episode together to Vivek specifically. So don't think I'm just ignoring the guy. I'm not. It's very important to talk about, but I want to give him, more than just a couple of minutes. So we will get to Vivek, just not in this episode. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is The Sound of Freedom. So you've probably heard of this film. Hopefully you've seen it. It stars Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in Passion of the Christ. And it has him starring as Tim Ballard. So here's the synopsis of the film. Sound of Freedom, based on the incredible true story, shines a light on even the darkest of places. After rescuing a young boy from ruthless child traffickers, a federal agent learns the boy's sister is still captive and decides to embark on a dangerous mission to save her. With time running out, he quits his job and journeys deep into the Colombian jungle, putting his life on the line to free her from a fate worse than death. Now, after hearing that synopsis, assuming you haven't seen the film, and all you know about it is what I've just read to you, you probably think, I bet that's a pretty good movie. I think that's probably a pretty important movie. Based on a true story about child trafficking, something that is hugely important in today's day and age, considering how many children are trafficked each and every year, each and every day. I think that you would probably look at this synopsis in this film and say, that's a cause worth putting our money into, that's important, and it's a good thing. So you probably won't be surprised when you hear that the left doesn't like the movie. That probably won't surprise you. I mean, a lot of people on the right are acting surprised. They're acting like, why do they not? Why are they hating on this film? What is wrong with, really? What's wrong with these people? Really? What's wrong? I think it's pretty obvious what's wrong with these people. They're evil. They're part of the agenda. They are part of what this movie is exposing, right? So they've tried to link it with like far-right fringe groups to try to pretend like it's not a good film, to try to pretend like it's all fake, utter nonsense and garbage. And all they've really done is prove to everyone what we already should have known, which is that they are in on it. Okay? Let me ask you, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but this is me just asking a question of anyone that dare answer it. Okay? There's a film. It is a true story about a man who saw child trafficking occurring and did something to stop it. He exposed it. It's huge, and it goes in depth into the evils and intricacies of child trafficking. That's it. There's no other agenda, nothing else. That's it. If you were to see someone talking about that movie and saying that, no, that's a far-right conspiracy theory, don't watch it, don't listen to it, it's awful, and all these things, what would your thought be? I mean, maybe legitimately I'm crazy, but my first thought jumps to, why are they bashing a true story about child trafficking? That feels like it should be a bipartisan, honest, and good thing to expose. And the fact that the left doesn't like the movie should really tell you something. Okay? I mean, here's an article from The Guardian. Here's the title of the article. The Sound of Freedom, the QAnon adjacent thriller seducing Americans. This is from many media outlets. They're criticizing a true story as being from QAnon, which is this far, according to them, a far right fringe group that comes up with conspiracy theories and hoaxes, and they're labeling this true story somehow part of this fringe, conspiracy theorist group because they don't want you to watch it. That should be bad. That should put up red flags in your mind. If it doesn't, you're not hopeless, but please rethink through it, because if that doesn't throw up red flags, then pretty much nothing will. But it gets better, because according to Forbes, not only, this is not according to Forbes, not only has it been criticized, but according to Forbes, it took the number 2 spot at the box office this past weekend, $27 million from Friday to Saturday, and it only lost this weekend to the brand new Mission Impossible film that came out this weekend starring Tom Cruise, one of the biggest acting names. That's the only film it lost to. It passed Indiana Jones this weekend. It passed Insidious, a horror movie. It is crushing it at the box office, having already done $85 million in total sales. It's now the 18th highest grossing film in U.S. sales this year. Okay? But this is where it gets really crazy, because it did all those things. But let's take a look at this video before I spoil it, and then we'll talk about it.
Excuse me.
This horrible
Starting
smell.
it over.
Excuse me.
This horrible smell. It smelled almost like an electrical fire.
We're getting refunds for the Sound of Freedom because apparently the water pressure in the bathrooms aren't working here, so no one can watch.
They literally had the lights on.
They kept the lights on the entire movie.
Who does that?
Should be back up in about, I would say, about 5 minutes, okay?
And they turn the movie off.
Just to let you guys know again, it is gonna get hot. It is gonna be like that throughout the whole movie.
So why should only this one though, not all the other ones?
So that was a small amount of what is becoming a huge conspiracy theory, which in my opinion isn't really a conspiracy if it's true, which is that a lot of theaters around the country are somehow having problems during the filming. A lot of people, that is a very small number compared to the amount of people saying that they were forced refunds because the AC wasn't working in that particular theater. People that were forced refunds because they were told that something was wrong with the film, there was a problem, and then they showed up at the theater anyway to look into that theater room and saw a different film playing. So clearly there's something going on, and when big media companies are in on it, and entertainment and news companies are bashing the film, and it's all kind of coinciding, you start to be like, oh, you're calling me a conspiracy theorist? Are you just ignoring what's right in front of you? Because this is pretty spot on clear that there is something going on here, right? Okay, so on top of that, there was a Bloomberg article titled QAnon and Sound of Freedom both rely on tired Hollywood tropes. Bloomberg also tweeted that link to that article with the caption, "Is Sound of Freedom a QAnon dog whistle, or is it just another thriller? Noah Berlatsky saw the movie and has an answer." You probably don't know the name Noah Berlatsky. Pretty much nobody actually does. But luckily, we have investigative journalists on Twitter by the name of Andy No, who researched this guy, looked him up, and it turns out he's a leftist activist, and he was the spokesperson for an MAP advocacy group named Prostasia. MAP stands for Minor Attracted Person, or pedophile, evil, millstone and ocean deserving person, as I like to call them. In 2017, he tweeted that pedophiles are just a stigmatized group who get designated as deviants for hateful purposes. So that is the kind of person that's bashing a child trafficking movie. A true story child trafficking movie is being bashed by a pedophile. Yeah, there's not really anything else to say. Okay. Next story. Affirmative action was struck down, as we all know, finally. Now the left is trying to pretend like legacy admissions are an evil, horrendous, awful thing, and that they are exactly the same as affirmative action. And if you want to get rid of affirmative action, you also have to get rid of legacy admissions. If you don't, you're a raging, awful racist who hates everyone, and you're disgusting and throw you out of the country. That is essentially what they say of legacy admissions. But I think we need to talk about it a little bit. So Harvard legacy rates sit around 34% acceptance in 2022 and 29% acceptance in 2021. Okay, Yale University, 12% in 2023 and 8% in 2024. Stanford University, 16.2% 2023. Brown University, around 30 to 35%. Okay, so these are the Ivy League schools that have legacy admissions, and all of them are incredibly low percentages, right? So pretending like somehow you have this immensely higher chance of getting in if you are, a legacy child, your parents or your grandparents went to the school. sure, you have a slightly higher chance, but Yale, 8% acceptance rate for legacy admissions when the regular Yale acceptance rate isn't much below that. So I think that this is a huge fake story in general, just looking at the percentages. But that's trying to pretend like legacy admissions aren't important. For starters, legacy admissions are not inherently racist. Okay? Affirmative action literally says, based on the color of your skin, we are going to give you entrance. Legacy admissions has nothing to do with the color of your skin. There's people on the left trying to pretend like it does, like all the people who went to college are old white people for generations, as if black people don't go to college today. And if black people do get into college today based on merit from, the other 60, 70, 80, or 90% of open slots that aren't legacy admissions, if they get in, you know what their child becomes? A legacy student. The child of that black individual that goes to college becomes a legacy student and can get in through legacy admissions. So I think the whole thing is preposterous and it has nothing to do with race at all. But on top of that, if you take away legacy admissions, you take away a huge part of what makes schools like Harvard. Do you know why people go to Harvard? Sure, there is a myriad of reasons, right? You go to Harvard, one, because it's Harvard, right? So you went to Harvard. Or if you're Michael Knowles, you went to Yale, and hopefully you didn't get a useless degree, right? Like underwater basket weaving at Harvard. Or hopefully you didn't turn out like, Ketanji Brown Jackson running on the Supreme Court and not being able to define what a woman is because she's not a biologist, okay? But you go to Harvard because, it's in the name, it's prestigious, okay? You don't really go to Harvard because Harvard has better teachers. Maybe that was true at one point in the distant past. That's not really true anymore. No one really attends Harvard because they have incredibly gifted, high IQ professors. People attend Harvard, one, because of the name, but possibly even more importantly, because of the connections and the networking that you get from going to schools like Harvard. You know that if you attend Harvard, that there are going to be students there whose daddy owns a Fortune 500 company. Okay? You make another friend whose father owns a hugely prestigious law firm based out of DC that does political work. Well, you really want to work there. You know how you work there? You go to Harvard. You take away legacy admissions, one, you have no more school loyalty, which, again, defeats the whole purpose of schools that are Ivy League schools. You run out of donors, okay, so the school doesn't get its funding, and the majority part of why the merit-based people want to go to Harvard gets thrown away. So now the merit-based people don't care to go to Harvard over really any other school. I mean, it loses its prestige very rapidly if you do that. So one, it's not racist. So the Supreme Court has no basis to knock down legacy admissions. They knocked down affirmative action because it was discriminatory based on race. Okay, legacy admissions are not. But if you were to knock down legacy admissions, you would be taking away the whole reason that people who, want to get in on merit would want to get in, which is the connections and the networking that you get from going to schools like Harvard. So the whole thing is just preposterous. The last article we have to talk about, not the last article, the last story is about Twitter in general, but we're going to start with this. So Twitter recently paid out their content creators, right? The people that tweet and got the most impressions got actually pretty decent paychecks having just, tweeting. So I think this is a pretty incredible thing. I think that Musk is doing something pretty incredible here. But of course, it was impossible for the left to just say, this is a good thing, Musk. Even though we don't agree with you, what you've done here is pretty incredible. They couldn't or wouldn't do it. Instead, here's what Taylor Lorenz wrote. You've probably heard her name. She's doxed people. She's been banned from Twitter before. But here's what Taylor Lorenz wrote. She wrote an article entitled, "Far-Right Twitter Influencers Were the First on Elon Musk's Monetization Scheme." The subtitle said, "The platform is paying high-profile creators, including Andrew Tate, thousands of dollars for posting to the app." Here's what some of the article said. The first beneficiaries appear to be high-profile, far-right influencers who tweeted how much they've earned. Ian Miles Chong, Benny Johnson, Ashley St. Clair, and an anonymous account called End Wokeness all touted their earnings. Okay, so that's what Taylor Lorenz said. So if you were to just read that, having no other knowledge, you would be convinced right then and there that Elon Musk is only paying creators that are tweeting far-right things. Or maybe you'd be convinced that people who are tweeting far-right things are making Elon Musk more money. Either way, that's what you'd be convinced of after having read her article. And yet, she is pretty much just straight up lying. Like, yeah, I guess there's some twist room in there, but you have to do some professional twisting. Because here's the truth, and this is from a Twitter post from Brian Krasenstein, which is funny because He's also a liberal. But even he had to admit this. So here's the top 10 known payouts from the Twitter monetization thing. First was Internet HOF, which is a meme account, which made $107,000. Second was Billy M2K with $37,000. Mr. Beast, who's not a far-right guy, $25,800. Ed and Brian Krasenstein, which are brothers who are both liberals, who respectively made $25,800 and $24,305. Andrew Tate, who made $20,379. Benny Johnson, $9,500. And Wokeness, $10,400. And Ashley St. Clair made $7,153. So you might have noticed from the official actual payout numbers that it appears like people on the left actually made more money than people on the right. And that people who were neutral made the most, as in, Mr. Beast, Internet HOF, meme accounts, made the most. Far left made the second most, and far right, or if you can even call them far right, made the third most, or the least amount, in terms of the actual groups that were paid. So Taylor Lorenz has yet again lied to the American public by pretending like Elon Musk has catered to the far right in his payout amounts that he gave to creators, when the truth is that he didn't cater to anybody. He just paid out the people that made money. He just paid out the people that got a whole lot of views and gave them their respective earnings from the amount of views that they got and ad dollars that they brought into Twitter. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. Same thing YouTube does. The only difference is that YouTube censors people they do not like, who says that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's pretty much the only difference here, is that Twitter isn't censoring people and is paying them out regardless of their political affiliation. I think that's pretty evident considering people from all political affiliations just got paid. But it goes deeper than that. Not just with the payout, but in general. So Threads, if you've heard of it, is the Instagram Zuck alien version of Twitter that nobody likes. Threads came out and everyone was touting it. And well, not people on the right, people on the left. Of course, we're touting it as the fastest growing social media of all time. It was the fastest social media to ever reach 100 million participants. The problem is that pretty much every single one of those participants came from Instagram because of a pop-up that they got telling them they should go download it, right? Like I did. I got an ad that said you should download Threads. It's a companion to the Instagram app. You know how many Instagram users there are? 2 billion active monthly users worldwide. Of that 2 billion, 100 million downloaded a companion app to Instagram, which is 5%. 5%. Does that seem like a huge number to you? If not, you're probably sane. No, it doesn't seem like a huge number. In fact, it sounds kind of like a moderate number, like a very kind of conservative number comparatively. If you have 2 billion people on your platform and you advertise a companion app to go along with that platform and only 5% of them download it, I wouldn't consider that a raging success like everyone seems to have. Not only that, but it appears like since then, we've had a huge drop in usership. I mean, already since Threads dropped, we went from 10 active user minutes or 20 active user minutes per day down to 10 minutes of user activity per day on average. So that's a 50% drop over the last week or two, which is crazy. Meanwhile, Twitter, on the other hand, is growing in size. It's growing in active user minutes. They're breaking records pretty much every week for how often people are on Twitter and how much they're scrolling and how much they're tweeting. I mean, they're doing huge things, and now they're paying content creators. And Mark Zuckerberg is over here like, no, I created an app that, we censor people who are mean. Please come download. And that's the advertisement, and nobody likes it. Go figure, right? So Twitter is not only doing that, but they're doing a whole lot of other things. So I think this is one big thing. We don't really have time. We're running out of time here. But one of the bigger things that Twitter has done, it's not really Twitter. It's XAI. It's an AI company led by Elon Musk, and the team includes individuals who have worked at DeepMind, OpenAI, Google Research, Microsoft Research, Tesla, the University of Toronto. Many of the people in the group that's starting XAI led the development of breakthroughs like AlphaStar, AlphaCode, Inception, Minerva, GPT 3.5, and GPT 4. So these are some incredible engineers and software people who are creating the next stage of AI. Elon has talked before about how he thinks it's very dangerous if you create an AI and you tell it that it is allowed to lie, or you tell it what truth is rather than let it discover truth. Because when you do that, you end up with things like GPT-4, where you go talk to Chat GPT and you ask it, are trans individuals, what you ask it a question about if trans ideology is legitimate, and it goes, well, of course, I think that no matter what your sexual identity or what you identify as should have zero impact, and I think it's incredibly important that we give people care. And it's like, really? Did you come to that conclusion on your own? Because it doesn't really sound like it. It definitely sounds like something you were told, which is what Elon Musk has talked about before. It's an incredibly dangerous thing to take something with the programming ability of AI and inject into it the ability to lie and to pretend like things are true that are not true. So I think it's incredibly heartening that Elon Musk is starting this company. I think that it speaks to the veracity of Twitter itself. I think it speaks to the fact that, Zuckerberg is trying to take over the world with in regards to social media, and his app is practically failing, right? Meanwhile, Twitter's over here getting better and better, getting more and more users, getting more and more active user minutes on the board, paying people, starting AI companies, okay? Which, again, it's on the list of things that we see in the world that are happening that are positive. A lot of times we're seeing things in the world that we're looking at them, we're like, we're losing, the left is winning, and it's really unfortunate, and it's really disheartening, and we kind of get upset about it. And then things like this are happening, and they're very, comparatively, they feel like small things, but they are wins. And we need to treat them like wins, like the Bud Light boycott that is still working, the Target boycott, the fact that the free speech platform is the successful platform, while the one admittedly doing censorship is flailing its arms and falling to its utter demise. These are good things, and we need to take the time and realize that they are good things. All right, that's it for today. We're going to have more episodes coming out later. We're going to be talking about Vivek, some really important things, so stick around. But I will see you guys on the next episode.